Right, okay, we continue to unpack the story of SABC News. 75 years ago, our first news broadcast took place, and that was on radio, because television only came in the 70s, can you believe it, in South Africa? And yet, we were one of the pioneers of film in the world. But television took its time, sadly. Anyway, we're celebrating 75 years of producing news, but there are many people over time who have had many roles within the SABC and have been journalists and editors and helped shape what the public became to know as the SABC itself. And one person is Gary Alfonso. And he joins us now on the line. Gary, great to talk to you. 75 years celebrating SABC News. And you were very much a part of that story. I could put up pictures that would embarrass you as a young journalist with long hair. Take us back to your first day at SABC and what that experience was like starting your journalism journey.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, it was an interesting story of exactly 10 years, 10 days, 10 hours, and 10 minutes from 1989 to 1999 at the SABC. And if I had to tell you about day one, I drove into Bloemfontein. I just finished a stint in Southwest Africa, Namibia then, and I drove into Bloemfontein, and I saw emergency vehicles rushing past me, and I'd driven through the night, and I got to the SABC in Bloemfontein, the SABC radio news department, and they immediately sent me out to a story of which a guy from one South African infantry, from the Parabats battalion, had fallen out of the plane, or had his parachute hadn't deployed, and he broke every bone in his body and survived. So I literally drove into my first story, driving into Bloemfontein past the military base.
My goodness. So, SABC News went through different incarnations depending on what was happening politically at the time. How much of that did you see, and what were the changes that you saw? Because you saw pre-elections, pre-94, post-94, and things changed significantly in a short space of time, didn't they?
Yeah, Peter, it was very evident from the minute I started at the SABC that there were other undercurrents in the organization going on at the time. And when I talk about other undercurrents, there was constant attempts by the police communication services to find out what the SABC's journalists were covering, trying to get you to tell them what was happening at the university, at the meeting of students, etc. So a lot of disinformation going on all the time, and I particularly found that in the regions I worked in first, which was Bloemfontein, Port Elizabeth, and then Pretoria. But I was with retrospect, looking back, I was really fortunate to be part of a process whereby South Africa's the democratization of South Africa's broadcasting environment was really a burning issue, and I was literally in the right place at the right time, a young person working in television and broadcasting, being able to help shape the messaging of the emerging voice of the real South Africa, and nothing really gives me as much satisfaction today as a human being as having been part of that process. It was really awesome to meet Nelson Mandela when he came out of prison, to see his first big rallies in places like Bloemfontein and Port Elizabeth, and then to go through the whole process whereby the interim constitution was being negotiated. I was a young political reporter. I was working at the World Trade Center when the AWB came crashing through the glass doors, trying to derail the process of writing South Africa's constitution. All the parties were there. The current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, F.W. de Klerk, and the whole array of South African politicians were there when that happened. And then the magic of the 1994 election on April 27th, 1994. And then I think the other highlight for me was being chosen to travel with President Mandela to Washington on his first official trip as South African president, and also speaking at the United Nations. South Africa's president, obviously, after all those years in prison, was just an incredible time journalistically. And then as we saw the political party creation after 1994, the political dispensation in South Africa, and seeing wonderful young people coming into the SABC and being able to be part of a process that trained people in television storytelling. And great people that you see on air today were part of this process between 1994 and maybe 1998, 99, when really there was just a blank sheet or a blank canvas in what the public broadcaster was going to be.
I think you've given us clues, my next question, and it really speaks about the role of the public broadcaster and what it has been able to do over time. What's been your experience of it? I've worked in private media and public broadcast, and I've always been deeply enriched by the work of the public broadcaster, much more than the commercial stations. It was enjoyable, but there's, I think, a sense of purpose that I found much more enriching in public broadcasting. What was your experience, and what do you think the role of the public broadcaster has been over time?
Yeah, I think the really interesting part happening just before 1994 and then post 1994 is there were really interesting stakeholders and players in the field of public broadcasting in South Africa. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation was here, the SABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation were here, and they were all part of a process trying to help us. And I was really junior. I became the manager of television training because I'd stepped out of the news department in order to help with this process of creating the storytellers of tomorrow that would be part of the public broadcaster rather than the state broadcaster, which the SABC was, without a doubt, the voice of the National Party before. And that's maybe just a line that everyone must never forget, is when one political party controls the narrative, it becomes a terrible environment for anybody to operate in. So I think, Peter, you also sum it up correctly, that if broadcasting is in your blood, the SABC will always be your spiritual home. And I regard the SABC as my spiritual home to this day. Even though I'd left, more than 25 years ago, I regard the SABC absolutely as my spiritual home. Broadcasting is in my blood. But the second thing about that is the fact that protecting the integrity of an environment that really should be the voice of the people, which is what the process was between 1994 and 1999 in creating this format of journalism that allowed people to question politicians, to a point, because at the end of the day, they were put into power by people who voted for them. And keeping politicians accountable to the people that they vote for is a very, very objective form of free speech. So, and it doesn't mean you need to trash anybody. It doesn't. You just simply go onto the ground and state and tell the story and how it impacts ordinary people. And so I think when it comes to being the public broadcaster, every journalist should always keep in mind that at the end of the day, their boss is not a political party. Their boss is the constituents of South Africa who voted politicians into positions of accountability. And I think as a public broadcaster, the role of a broadcaster really is and should be to represent the people that want the leaders that they vote into power to be accountable. And I think then it's job done.
Gary, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your service at the public broadcaster, and I look forward to you growing your hair again to the back in the day.
Yeah, I shall be.
Thanks so much, Gary. That's Gary Alfonso, who spent many, many years at the SABC as a reporter, and he told the stories there. Fond memories that he has of the time that he spent with the public broadcaster doing work, important work, during a very important time in the country's history.